Warm weather training camps, a chorus of boos, and why is splitting up so hard to do? Hello, I'm Charlotte Cohen, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views, and analysis you need on Tuesday, the 2nd of April. Is it ever right to boo your side? In the week the Scotland team were booed off the park twice, we take a closer look at punters' current favoured method of criticism. It's almost time for the Scottish Premiership split, but are the fans beginning to turn against it? And finally, training camps, a title-clinching catalyst or a recipe for teams switching off at the worst possible time.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Well, joining me to chat all of those things this morning, Robbie Neilson, former Hearts and Dundee United manager. Robbie, morning. Have you ever booed your players on the park? Is that ever...
Morning, Charlotte. I've wanted to.
You've kept it together.
Yes, and I can understand why some of the fans behind me have booed at times as well. Yes, but I don't think it makes a great togetherness. But yes, I have experienced that at times.
And alongside us, Stephen McGowan, Herald football writer. Morning, Stephen. Have you ever booed from the stands?
The question you should have asked Robbie Neilson there was, has he ever been booed rather than has he ever booed?
Has he been booed by you?
Well, no, not yet, but we're only a minute into this, so give it time.
Well, Scotland were booed off twice in their most recent international break. They're not alone, though. From the national team to clubs across the SPFL, fans have been turning on their own sides this season. It's made the headlines, but is supporter frustration getting worse, or is this something Scottish football has always lived with? First of all, Stephen, I'll come to you. I mean, we were talking about the booing from both of the Scotland games at Hampden and then again down in Liverpool. What did you make of it?
Well, it's not a uniquely Scottish thing. If you look at the outcome of England against Japan at Wembley, where England fans are booing their team as well, and maybe at some point the great British public need to come to terms with the fact Japan are actually quite a decent team. But I think most people would agree that if you are a supporter paying £40 odd, then you have a right to express yourself. You know, nobody can stop them. And I think if you do try and tell Scottish football fans not to do something, you're only guaranteeing the opposite. But I just think in this case, I think it was misplaced. I don't think this team deserved to be booed. They have reached the first World Cup in 28 years. They've reached 3 of the last 4 tournaments. I think the problem is that the definition of success for Scotland has changed. I think previously when Steve Clarke came in 2019, it was merely getting to a major tournament. Now that people have had a experience of that, it's been a bit of an anticlimax twice at the Euros. They want more and they aspire to more, and I can understand that. I think we all do. The question would be whether this particular group of players is absolutely up to that, because they're lacking in key positions. Goalkeeper, don't have Aaron Hickey, don't have Ben Gannon Doak at the moment, don't really have a goal-scoring striker. A bit short of Wood from the left-hand side as well, and central defence can be a bit ropey. So I think talk of a golden generation is a bit overblown, to be honest with you, and I think booing the players is a bit overblown as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what Andy Robertson said, Stephen. What you touched on was that it seems like people are forgetting that this is a Scotland team who are in the World Cup, who didn't just spend the last week in those horrible playoff games. So, it's all about perspective. But Robbie, I wonder what you think the booing was about. Stephen touched on, paying a ridiculous amount of money for a ticket to the game, not being overly impressed with what they saw on the field, lack of, maybe different options, the likes of Finlay Curtis only getting 15 minutes in the first game, not seeing, different players introduced. But I wonder what you think the culmination was.
Stephen kind of hit the nail on the head. I think expectation levels have gone up. The last time we were at Hampden, we saw an unbelievable overhead kick and a goal from the halfway line. We're not going to see that every week, but a lot of time people expect to see that every time they turn up at Scotland now, because we have some top class players. And also, like, Japan are ranked 18 in the world. They just beat England. They're a very, very good team. So I think that's the expectation level has, Steve, when he came in, was low. Let's be honest, the expectation level was low. Now we're probably at the highest it's been for 20 odd years, maybe 30 years. So I totally understand the fans' frustration, because they travel a long way They pay a lot of money as well, and they have the right to express their feelings on it. And the feelings were it wasn't at the same level as it was against Denmark, but is it ever going to get to that level again? It might be another 20 years before it gets that. So there's got to be a realisation of where we are, but also there's got to be probably a bit more exciting than we saw in the Japan game and the Ivory Coast game as well, because I just felt it was just a bit flat. But you're in these, these games that don't really mean a lot. So there's no energy really coming from the stands. There's no energy really coming from the pitch either. So it just wasn't there, was it? I think when we probably look back on it, it was 2-0 games really that probably just brought a bit of negativity to the whole group, which we don't need because we're a nation that needs to go to the World Cup and we need to be together. We need the Tartan Army behind the players and behind Steve massively.
I think what it's really about is a lot of hostility towards the manager now, because familiarity is breeding contempt.
Yes, it is.
I mean, if you get, we've seen it, Derek McInnes at Aberdeen, Robbie, what have you. I think eventually fans get to a point where they just want a change, where they get a bit, it all feels like it's stagnating, getting a bit stale, and maybe Scotland have reached that stage. But the other thing I wondered about, and your more thoughts this as a manager, Robbie, is about the friendlies you take on. I mean, Steve Clarke says he wants to take on tough friendlies. He doesn't want to take on gimmies, if there's any such thing for Scotland. But you do wonder if he's making a rod for his own back with that sometimes.
Yeah, when I looked at it, like Ivory Coast are still, I think, ranked 34, 35 in the world. They're still a good team. They're still ahead of us, and I agree with that. I think maybe taking a Japan game and then maybe taking an almost a gimme where we get the atmosphere up, and potentially taking, the Japan game down at Goodison Park, and then the home game, against a lesser team, just to get that feel-good factor, because we're now going into the World Cup on a little bit of a downer, to be honest with you, which I know we've got a couple of friendlies before it, and you hope that gets everyone going again. But I do think that's part of it. And also, sometimes people want change nowadays. That's life. They want change. Sometimes it's not for the better, because Steve's done a fantastic job, but they just want change.
Yeah, we've seen it a lot in the league as well. I mean, we saw Stephen Celtic fans booing Schmeichel a few weeks ago. Rangers fans love a boo when things aren't going well. So we see it across that as well. But are fans ever justified in that sort of reaction?
I think people feel that maybe there's been a bit more of it since COVID. Actually, I don't really know what the justification for that would be, but I mean, fans will always feel justified because, as we've touched on a couple of times, they've paid their money. But the phrase which comes to mind, it's always thrown at them, and which they hate, is entitlement. This sense of entitlement. I mean, the thing with buying a ticket, you can pay £40 for it, but it doesn't give you some contract that the team are going to entertain you. That's not how it works. It doesn't give you some binding agreement. You can buy a concert ticket and the band can be rubbish sometimes. So I think fans need to just have a bit of perspective that actually they are watching a team which are doing things which they haven't done for a very long time. A lot of them are going to be going to the World Cup. They're paying a lot of money for that, and they want the best for the team. But if you're booing the team, you're being a fan, but you're not supporting them. And again, another point, Robbie, I suppose, will have better insight of than me is, has a player ever played better when he's been booed? I mean, I would imagine that you shrink into your shell a little bit. I don't know, but it doesn't seem to me to be a strategy that's going to make the team play better.
Yeah, I agree. I think, for me, fans are justified if they want to boo, but I think it's booing at the end of the game once the game is done. I think during the game, especially during it, but even at half-time, as a player group, if you're coming in at half-time and you're getting booed off, at times it's justified because, you've not played well, but you would rather the fans, got behind you on the way off, to try and boost you as a group. So, yeah, totally that. I think at times the booing is justified, but I would prefer it if it's going to happen. It's at the end of the game, to show that frustration with the performance, but I don't think it helps during the game.
But let's be clear, it wasn't a majority of the fans, and Andy Robertson said that as well. It was, at Hampden it was quite sporadic. I just heard that a small smattering behind me in the South Stand. There's more of it, I would say, at the Hill Dickinson, both at half time and at full time, but it was still a minority.
We had a great podcast yesterday. One fan from each of the top three teams talking about the split was one of the things that came up, and whether or not it actually works anymore. Liam, who was the Hearts fan who was on, was saying he doesn't actually like it. But come to you first, Robbie, because you'll have experienced it. What did you make of the split as from a managerial point of view?
I'll be honest, like, Charlotte, I think it's a really good idea. I like it. It's my personal perspective on it. I think it brings a bit of excitement to that kind of middle period. Your games maybe 25 to 33, because there's pressure to get into the top six, because it makes a huge difference to the revenue the clubs are bringing in, which then projects for next year as well with your budget. And then once you get into the split, the games become super important, and they're all big games at either end of the table, And I think, like, from a Hearts perspective this year, you probably didn't want to split, because you're hoping then you're going to get maybe the 2 or 3 teams at the bottom of the league. You know what I mean? But now it's all going to be big games. The only difficulty you have sometimes when there's a big divide between everyone, and you get 3 or 4 teams in that kind of middle area where it's like positions 7 and 8 and 5 and 6 that can't do anything. But at this moment in time, probably the only team, Dundee United, are probably the season's almost done for them, which is very difficult, because they're not going to make the top 6 and they're not going to go down. So you've got one this season. So I think this season's an example of where it's worked well, because we're now going into McGowan. You're going to have Hearts against Rangers against Celtic. They're going to be having to play Motherwell and Falkirk. All these teams that are doing really well. So I personally, I really like it. Ultimately, I'd like a bigger league, but I don't think we'll ever get to that. But what we've got at the moment, I think it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, the other thing, I suppose, Robbie talking about, teams ending up with not really having anything to play for, teams at the top, it's going to make the top half unbelievably exciting. But at the bottom as well, I suppose if you're Kilmarnock or St Mirren and you're really trying to avoid that relegation playoff place, it's probably really nice to know you're not going to have to go to Celtic Park, you're not going to have to play Rangers, you're not going to have to play Hearts, you're playing the teams in and around you, Stephen.
Well, I don't know if Aberdeen would feel the same about that. I think the last thing they would want at the moment are games against Kilmarnock and St Mirren, to be honest. I mean, this St Mirren game is going to be a really intriguing one, isn't it? But look, it's an imperfect system, of course it is, and actually that's exemplified by, Robbie referred to Dundee United there. Dundee United probably are not going to make the top 6, almost certainly won't, but we still don't know for sure yet. Because we still don't know for sure, because both Dundee United and Falkirk had unexpected results last time out, they can't say what the post-split fixtures are going to be yet. So that's clearly an imperfect system, where you have one where you're not certain whether every team's going to have 19 home games, 19 away. Inevitably they won't. And I think that's accepted at the top level of the SPFL, who I think would have liked to have gone back to, say, 10 teams last April when this was last discussed. But the fact of this is that the clubs have looked at this time and time again, and they keep coming to the conclusion that the least bad option is 12 teams. As Robbie says, the fans want 16. Commercially, that's not seen to be a good move from a television point of view. So we keep coming back to this debate, and we keep coming back to the fact that ultimately 12 teams with the split is one of the best options, the best option. That's been the case more so when Celtic, for example, have been running away with the league, and there's been few issues to look at. And the split does give you some issues. It's just a bit unfortunate this season we don't really need one, because there's plenty of issues going on anyway.
That's the other thing I was going to say to you, Robbie, is it's pretty unique to Scotland. It is unique to Scotland. This is a part of our game that you kind of don't really see anywhere else.
They actually do it here in Belgium.
Do they?
Yeah, they do, yeah, but they do it even more complicated in Belgium. So they split into 3. And then the top, I think it's the top six, yeah, they half their points. So if you're sitting on 60 points, you then go into that last 6 games, whatever, 5 games, whatever, with, I think they play 10, they play back-to-back with 30 points. So they make it even more complicated here. But it makes it exciting. But they actually have 3 groups. So they have a relegation group, which they don't split the points, a middle group where they just, again, keep the same, but they only play for one Europe place, So they have it so they have it here, but Scotland does it miles better. Better.
That was my next question, was going to be who does it better.
Yes, they do. I think, I don't think, like Stephen says, I don't think we'll ever get to 16 or 18 teams, just from the television revenue, really, because they want 4 Old Firm games guaranteed almost, so that's the difficulty of it. So what we've got at the moment, I think it's the best way of doing it until we can get to a bigger league.
Right, I'll ask you both then. Stephen, keep the split?
Oh yeah, absolutely no question. I think it is the difference between a really tedious season sometimes and one which is brimming over with issues and excitement. So no question.
Robbie, I assume you're the same.
Yes, guaranteed. Football's about entertainment. We're going to have some massive games at both ends of the table this year.
Well, finally, let's talk training camps, because both Hearts and Rangers are reportedly set for some fun in the sun before we get into the split. Robbie, I wonder, you'll have been on a fair few. You've been on one this season, a little yes. away training camp. What do you make of them?
I think that what it does is it guarantees you, good training sessions, because you don't know what the weather's going to be like in Scotland. It gives you an opportunity to go out and maybe train twice a day if you want. But I prefer it if you have a winter break and you've maybe got like 3-4 weeks off and you go for a week. I think when you're in the rhythm of the season, I'll be honest, I'm not a great believer in it, because I think at times you'll miss a day travelling, you then have to reacclimatise to the temperature, whether you're going in the change of pitches. You're probably not going to train twice a day because you don't want to overload them for the game that's coming up in a week or 10 days time. So, and I'm not if it was me, I wouldn't be going at this time of year. I would do it in the winter camp in the pre-season, but I think at this time, you want to stay in that rhythm. The rhythm of the weather, the training, everything that's going on, because it's doing so well for both teams at the moment.
I suppose, Stephen, the one thing for Rangers is Danny Röhl didn't have a pre-season. He came in midway through. So I wonder if he would see this as the kind of first real chance to get the squad all together and get away and get some bonding in, some training time without any kind of interruptions or distractions.
Well, because the World Cup is coming along this year, the fixtures have been contracted, haven't they? They've been concertinaed into a shorter period of time, and that's not really giving teams a lot of time for training and working on drills or what have you. So there's a chance for that. It might relieve the tension as well. So I can get the logic. I mean, it probably won't surprise you to hear that journalists are big fans of warm weather training camps. I'm flying to Miami on May the 31st for a Scotland warm weather training camp, and I have to say I approve. I approve of them. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know that necessarily we have the same activities in mind as the players, but yeah, I mean, it's a feature in the modern game, and I think maybe if you are Derek McInnes or Danny Röhl at the minute, you're thinking this is a good way to divert minds and take some of the pressure off, because it's going to be quite a toxic situation in the coming weeks, and the walls are going to feel like they're closing in at times.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually. I wonder what you make of that, Robbie. I mean, Hearts, are potentially going into the split either top or second, depending on how the rest of these fixtures play out. Is that a good thing to kind of get them away from the bubble of Scotland?
I think if you're looking at it from a training perspective, it's probably not great, because you're not going to be able to do a mini pre-season because you're not going to have time. So you're just going to carry the same training load that you probably would back home. But I agree, like taking them away and out of the environment psychologically for the players could be beneficial for them, because they get away, they can go and relax, a bit of sunshine, and they come back refreshed. So I think that's going to be the main driver for them, is can they get the team refreshed for the next stage of the league. I don't really think it will be like a tactical or physical side of things. So, I think that, time will tell with these. You don't know. You've seen teams go away for a week and come back and hit the ground running, and other teams come back and, go down. It's ultimately down to the manager and the coaching staff. They want to go and do it. As Stephen says, that you get the warm weather, reporters will be there, they can get a bit of bonding. There's a good side of it, but from an actual physical, tactical side, it's much the same as just staying here.
Yeah, when we were talking about this, I just had visions of, remember that Celtic winter break they had? Was it the winter break?
Oh,
I think
yes,
the COVID season, and there was that picture of Neil Lennon and Scott Brown sitting on Sun Loungers having a pint. I was like, this, that obviously didn't really work out in Celtic's favour. So
I think with these, it's all dependent on how the first game goes when you come back. If Hearts come back and win the first game 5-0, it's the best idea in the world. If they come back and they lose 5-0, it's the worst idea in the world. So ultimately it comes down to that first game. you know, and that's it, you know. So like, if Celtic did that camp and came back and won the next 3 games in the bounce, everyone's like, oh, what a decision that was unbelievable. You know, but
when in actual fact they came back and I think they had a dozen players rolled out with COVID or something after the flight. So maybe that was deemed not to be the best decision.
Was that get booed off the next quarter?
that was a perfect storm, that one, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, that is all we've got time for. Many thanks to Robbie and Stephen, and thank you very much for listening. Remember, we are here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on your phone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll catch you again tomorrow.